I ranked every single Pokemon from every single generation, plus Legends Arceus, in 10 separate videos, going generation by generation on putting Pokemon S through F tier. And this was also said, did Pokemon truly fall off in terms of design, or in terms of Pokemon in general? And I used a whole complicated math formula, and if you don't want to hear that, skip to this point that I put on the screen, the little number. Go there if you want to hear math. Now let's go. So to find this, got every single Pokemon list I did. I calculated how many S tiers, A tiers, B tiers, C tiers, D tiers, and F tiers. So for example, I had 14 C tiers in Gen 1, and that's how I decided what Pokemon were what tier. And then I added a point value to each tier. S tier having 6 points, A tier having 5 points, and B tier having 4 points, and yada yada, 3, 2, 1. Now you might be saying, well, what if a Pokemon generation has more point or more Pokemon? And now that's where I did my amazing math. Then I divide the entire total sum of the points by the amount of Pokemon in the region to get an average. Yo, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because I'm 200 subscribers away from monetization. Yeah, back video. So, starting us off at the very bottom, the worst generation with an average of 4.12 in terms of ratings was Generation 9. Now, again, this is all personal, but I think the biggest problem with Gen 9 is when Pokemon are good, they're good. When they were S or A tier, they were good. But when they were terrible, they were D or F. There were many C tiers. In fact, there were more F tiers and S tiers than there were D or C tiers. It was just very skewed towards up or down, with a little dip in the middle. So I think that was the biggest problem, because when the design was either ugly or basic, I would put in lower D or F. But when the design was good and cool, obviously I would put it in S or A. So Generation 9 had the lowest overall score. So the next generation had an average score of 4.5, which is significantly higher than 4.12. However, everything else is still higher than it, and that would be Pokemon Legends Arceus. Legends Arceus mostly suffered from the amount of Pokemon, because there were some really good Pokemon. There were more Pokemon in S and A than there were in the lower tiers, but again, the problem was the amount of Pokemon. So because there were more Pokemon in S and A, you got some pretty high points from that, but B, C, D, and F, the amount of Pokemon in them, lowered the point average. So it suffered from a lack of Pokemon, and the Pokemon were pretty good, but of course, again, I don't like these two. There's something off about them. And yeah, next generation. So next on this list, you're noticing a little trend, but this trend will not continue, I promise you. Next lowest is Gen 8. I think the biggest problem with this generation, I believe, is the same as Gen 9. When a Pokemon looked good, it looked amazing. When a Pokemon looked terrible, again, it was terrible. I think another thing that also brought it down was trying to make more forms for Pokemon like Charizard or Venusaur. I mean, there were successful forms. I loved Gigantamax Blastoise, but when you try to make forms for Pokemon that already have forms, then it lowers a bit, especially if your forms look really, really ugly. Looking at you, Gigantamax Kingler. But this one just didn't hit the same as the other ones personally, so it had a final score of 4.6. Now, this one's going to make a lot of the OG fans mad, because with a score of 4.7, next is Gen 1. Now, Generation 1, I think, suffered from the fact that some of the Pokemon were bland and boring. And to be fair, it was Generation 1. It was going to be like that. You could only improve for the most part. So I think the S tiers in this generation weren't actually as strong as the S tiers in Generation 8 or 9, but I believe the F tiers weren't as weak as the F tiers in Generation 8 or 9. I just believe that when you average it all out, it's that the generation just had some pretty average, boring looking Pokemon. Just compared to the other Gen 1s, this is how they ranked. Now, a lot of people also get mad at this next one, because this is a cherished, sacred generation to some. However, I have criticized it heavily. Generation 4 had the next lowest score with 4.84. Now, I don't think this generation's bad. I actually think this generation has a lot of good Pokemon. Now, this is like closer to the Pokemon aren't bad. And I will say this, the Pokemon aren't bad in most of these generations that have already been ranked. It's just that they aren't as strong. Gen 4 definitely did not have the problem of when they're bad, they're really bad. But they also didn't have the problem of there were too many good ones. It suffered from Pokemon like Wormadam existing. Yeah, that exists. But it was helped by the legendaries were amazing in this generation. It helped that had the most legendaries, and legendaries are usually amazing. The starters were all really strong Pokemon, except for Prinplup I'm not the biggest fan of. But overall, this generation was pretty strong when it came to the Pokemon, so that's why it's number 6 here. Now, this is when we get into some higher tier stuff. We're in the top 5 now. And rounding up this top 5, or starting, I'm not rounding up, is Gen 2. Gen 2, unsurprisingly, is a good region. Its problem is, again, it's early on, so the Pokemon are pretty basic. So there were some misses, especially at this point when you compare it to the other generations. Some of these Pokemon have evolutions already. Like Murkrow did not have Honchkrow at this point, so everyone was like, oh, Murkrow's alright. But when you put into the context of Honchkrow exists, it does rank it down a bit, but it's still overall a good Pokemon. It's just that when you put them up against the generations after, with evolutions and all that, everything's improved, then the generation looks a bit weaker. But it had a lot of strengths. I think for Gen 2, even though the Pokemon were like basic compared to some of the later generations, their design still rocked. They were basic, yet they looked beautiful. I mean, Ho-Oh is just a bird, or Ho-Oh is just like a big bird. Lugia is kind of a whale thing, not sure. Should be water type still. But like, these designs are really basic, but they are beautiful. So I think Generation 2, I'm not sad about it being in the like upper echelon, even though it's near the middle. It's still really solid. Now this next one was very disappointing for me, because number 4 is Gen 5. And the reason this is disappointing is because Generation 5 is my favorite generation. It's got Pokemon Black and White 2. Two of my favorite Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 are my top 10 favorite games of all time, and I will always stand by that. The music's bustin', everything's fire, the story. But what I realized while making this list is that, God, I hate Pignite. Pignite is terrible. I realized in Generation 5, I love the most of the Pokemon. In fact, I have a really good opinion of 90% of Pokemon. But the ones I don't like, ugh, I hate them with a burning passion. I think that's why I could only get to 4. I think if I didn't hate Pignite as much and some other Pokemon, it would be a bit higher. But overall, it's doing pretty good up here. Now, we're in the top 3. And I was pretty surprised about this third pick. Because number 3 was Gen 6. Generation 6 was generation introduced Mega Evolutions. But for some reason, no Gen 6 Pokemon had Mega Evolutions. I mean, it makes sense. It's supposed to make other past Pokemon better. But yeah, Gen 6, I think, was very surprising for me. Because there are some bad Pokemon in Generation 6. But then I think about it, I'm like, wow. Most of those bad Pokemon that I don't like that much are from other generations. The Pokemon from this generation are pretty strong. I mean, the starters, Delphox, Chestnut, and Greninja are all really strong Pokemon. I mean, there are 3 legendaries, and all of them were immaculate, amazing. They didn't miss a single time with either of these, or the 3 of these. They just did such a good job. I mean, thinking about it, there weren't many misses in this generation. I mean, Aegislash is amazing. Trevenant is amazing. These are some of my favorite Pokemon. And I didn't even realize that until making this whole video. So I guess this is a learning experience for me too. And yeah, we're on to the second place. Now, next Pokemon generation is a generation I will always say is probably the most underrated generation. And that is Gen 7. Now, first of all, I will say there's a bit of bias in this list. Because Gen 7 was the first Pokemon generation I saved up money for to buy the games. So I was like beyond happy with that. So that was a bit of bias towards it. But even then, the Pokemon are just amazing. I mean, they perfectly nail all the tropical feeling to it. Of course, there were some bad Pokemon. Oh, sorry. It's just there's some hair in my mouth. But yeah, there was just some. It just fully brung the tropical vibes. Lunala and Sogaleo. Sogaleo, you think of the sun on a tropical hot beach, and then in the morning you're swimming around. But then you think of the night. You think of the moon overlooking the beach with the turtles hatching out their eggs and crawling towards the shore, getting their way to the ocean, while all the seagulls and whatever pelicans, whatever those are, come to eat the babies before they get to it. But it's just the legendaries. First of all, nailed a region perfectly. I love the introduction of these otherworldly Pokemon that aren't really even like, I don't even know if they're fully Pokemon in lore. They're kind of just like monsters. They have like a lot of them are like really terrible actually. Guzzlord literally destroy an entire dimension. But you know what? We caught it, and now we're battling Timmy's level 5 Ratcheta in this generation. Another thing this generation did was it introduced regional types or regional variants, which helped it boost it above. Because what's better than a spin on old Pokemon? I mean, and these weren't just Mega Evolutions. These weren't just, oh, these are here for now. No, these were entirely different. I mean, Sandslash, I already love Sandslash, but Alolan Sandslash bumped it up even more. And this generation just added so much with the regional forms. And the regional forms, on top of the already solid legendaries, I mean, the solid mythicals. I mean, there was only like one mythical, but also the solid like Pokemon roster in general. Put this up here. And last, I think you all know it is Gen 3. Gen 3 is held as, by many, probably one of the greatest generations for designs. I mean, when you think of the best generation for starters, Gen 3 never fails to come up in conversation. All 3 starters are immaculate. Like, perfect. The first forms, all S tiers. The second forms, I'll put A or S. But then the final forms were all S tiers. And even their Mega Evolutions were all impeccable. The legendary Pokemon discs were legendary. This was the first time it felt like the legendary Pokemon meant something to the region. I mean, Groudon and Kyogre weren't like Ho-Oh or Lugia. They weren't just, oh, the evil team was going to capture them, or they're there. No. These Pokemon were going to end the world, and you had to have Rayquaza come and stop them. Or if you're playing Ruby, that was Emerald. If you're playing Ruby Sapphire, you had to stop these world-ending Pokemon. The evil teams finally felt like evil. To be fair, this was the third generation. I mean, you had Rockets. So, like, that even made the Pokemon they use, like, even more impactful, because the Dark Dog, not Hound, you know what I'm talking about, that one. It felt more evil. It was already a Dark type, which was supposed to be evil type, but it helped make them even more sinister by putting them on this evil team that just despises, like, the world or something. I mean, they don't despise the world. They have their goals, but they didn't do well with their goals. But, like, all the Pokemon introduced were amazing. Legendaries were legendary. The starters truly felt like unique, one-of-a-kind Pokemon that they're supposed to be in the games. It's just all these Pokemon fit so perfectly. I mean, even Pokemon that were not the best, like Lunastone and Solrock, I still believe were good Pokemon. I mean, in fact, this region didn't even have any F tiers on my list. I mean, when I was making this, I looked at them like, oh, I'll add F tier, because that's what I usually have to do. I have to add F tier on the list, because they are only put A or S or D. But I'm like, you know what? I don't think I need F tier. The lowest one was Spiel's evolution, Celio, and it's like D tier. I just don't like it that much, but it's still not terrible. It's not F tier. This generation just hits it out of park with Pokemon designs, so for that reason, it had to be number 1. Now, in the final verdict, did Pokemon fall off? Kinda. I mean, the past 3 generations have not been good. Arceus, Scarlet and Violet, and Sword and Shield did not introduce the best Pokemon. They had the lowest scores. But also, Generation 7 and Generation 6, I mean, I guess, God, no, they're like 10 years old now. So I guess Pokemon has really fallen off. I mean, in terms of gameplay, if Legends or Scarlet Violet ran as well as Arceus or Sword and Shield, I'd rather play that than like Sword or Shield. In fact, those would actually be pretty good games. But in terms of Pokemon design, yeah, they kind of fell off. I think the problem is after a while, when they made Pokemon, they either hit or miss. There was no middle ground. So I think that's why. So did Pokemon fall off? Yeah. I thought the first video would be no, it didn't fall off. Looking back at it, yeah, it kind of fell off. But again, I don't think they were bad because I can make a tier list for like a lot of other things, and it would come out with lower total values than 4.6, 4.7. Heck, if I made like a, I don't know, a Digimon list, I guess, it would probably come out to lower value because these are just strong like designs overall. But again, when they missed, they missed. That's all I really have to say for this video. Want thanks for watching. Remember, like, subscribe, notification bell, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye. Just wanted to butt in here real quick and say thank you for everyone who went to the video first of all, and I'm trying to edit these videos. I'm learning how to edit. It's hard with work and school and stuff, so bear with me as I learn to edit these better. So you can see my thumbnails will be getting better. But yeah, I want to thank all for who made it to this video, and um, thank you for supporting me. I'll see you all next video.